So for this video, I'm going to be talking about each of the blue heroes in Artifact. I'm going to talk about which ones are seeing play in Constructed, at least as far as my closed beta experience. We're also going to talk about which ones are useful in Draft, and go over each of their abilities and their signature cards, and just talk about when you would consider using them and or when they might be applicable. Some of these are definitely not seeing play right now, so this one might be a little bit rough. But let's get started. Starting with Crystal Maiden. We're starting off with one of the ones that's kind of rough. Crystal Maiden has 2 attack, 5 health, no armor. That's just not very good. 2 attack means it takes 2 combats for her to even kill a melee creep, and 5 health means she survives 2.5 attacks from a melee creep. That's not even counting heroes. She does have a pretty good passive ability. The passive ability says that at each lane, right? So the first time at each tower, when you play an allied spell, so it can be a spell of any color, you restore 2 mana to the tower in that lane. So while this isn't traditional ramp, it's not going to let you play expensive cards sooner. This does ramp up your presence in a lane. Typically with Crystal Maiden, you see her played in like this round 3 slot, so that she'll come down when you have 5 mana on a tower. And that would allow you to maybe play like a 3 mana spell and then maybe a 4 mana creep afterwards. And you can do that in multiple lanes because, again, her passive actually goes across all lanes. It's very similar to like Drow's aura. So this is why Crystal Maiden has the lower stats, because her passive affects the entire game. However, those low stats are still a really big liability, and her signature card is okay. So as I said, if you're playing her in that 5th slot, in the round 3 slot, she'll come down. Maybe you can play her signature card, Frostbite, for 3. You'll get your 2 mana back, and then you could play like a 4 mana creep. Frostbite deals 2 damage to a unit and disarms it. If you're not sure what disarm does, we can do the old mouse over here. A disarmed unit does not attack its target during battles. So during the combat phase, if a unit's been disarmed, they just don't deal damage. This is not, however, like silence or stun, so if you use disarm on a hero, that hero will still allow you to play cards of that color. So, you know, for 3 mana, you deal 2 damage and disarm. It's okay. It's a great combat trick, but this isn't like a really wow signature card. And Crystal Maiden's stats give her a liability, so unless you are trying to really make use of the aura, she's just not worth your time. Now, as of recording this in the closed beta, there's not much demand for her aura, and as such, she's not seeing play in Constructed. And in Draft, she's very rarely played because she is only situationally better than the basic hero. If you have a lot of spells and you really feel like you can leverage her passive, then it might be worth it to play her over the basic blue hero. Otherwise, our buddy Jahmai the Wise, I'm probably slaughtering that name, by the way, just has better stats, more survivability, and the signature card is probably not as good as Crystal Maiden's, but it's close enough that, in all honesty, our Wise buddy here is just likely better than Crystal Maiden unless you've got a great way to use her passive. So she's just not seeing a lot of play. Sorry, I'm stuttering a bit there. Not really worth your time most of the time. So next up we have Earthshaker. Earthshaker is a hero that I was really fond of when I first started playing, and then unfortunately I started to use him less and less. 2 attack, which isn't great. Again, that's 2 turns to kill a melee creep, but you're gonna see a trend with the blue heroes. There aren't many blue heroes that have that magic 4 attack number. So 7 health, also not bad, but not great. There's a lot of heroes that can one-shot Earthshaker when he comes down. Axe, for example, is a really common one in Constructed, and certainly can take out Earthshaker. Phantom Assassin is another common Constructed hero. Bounty Hunter is another common Constructed hero. There's a large number of heroes that can take out Earthshaker. So that's part of the problem, is his stats. Now, he makes up for that with a pretty cool active ability. The Fissure ability will stun Earthshaker's enemy neighbors this round. It has a 4-round cooldown, but stuns are very, very valuable. They can lock your opponent out from playing cards in that lane if it's used on heroes. So, if Earthshaker is positioned well, his active ability is very strong. The problem is that he's not always positioned well, so unless you have a way to shuffle him around, you might not be able to get the most out of his active. So That's like a boom or bust activated ability. Now, this is why I liked Earthshaker when I first started playing the game. His signature card is Echo Slam. 7 mana is expensive, but you deal damage to each enemy equal to the number of enemies. If you've got 5 enemies on a lane, Echo Slam will deal 5 damage to each of the enemies. That's a pretty good board clear. That's a pretty good AoE spell. The problem is that usually you're kind of already losing a lane by the time the Echo Slam is worth your time. And if you're losing a lane, you might be losing it so bad that Echo Slam isn't enough to get the job done. So in Constructed, what you typically see is that blue control decks will run cards like At Any Cost and Annihilation, because Annihilation will for sure clear the board, and At Any Cost will do like a pseudo board clear, but for a much cheaper cost, right? At Any Cost, granted, your side of the board takes the damage as well, but it does 6 to everything, and if you're just trying to clear out a bunch of creeps so that you don't die, paying a much cheaper mana cost and being able to use it much sooner is far more beneficial than waiting till turn 7 to do it one-sided. So Echo Slam is not as great in Constructed because you just have access to better options. However, in Draft, Earthshaker can really shine. If you put him in that round 3 slot, so where he's coming in when you are much closer to being able to play Echo Slam, and you're bringing him in when he's much closer to using his activated ability and his stats are less of a liability, he can be a fine hero. I actually like playing him in Draft, but Constructed, there are just stronger blue heroes, and then even more so, as good as his signature card is, there are other cards that are not tied to heroes that probably get the job done better. So Earthshaker is a fine draft card, not seeing a lot of play in Constructed right now, despite the many uses. Again, Echo Slam is one of those cards that is at its best when you're in at least a contested lane, if not like a lane that you are losing. So next up we have my guy Jahmai, the Wise. Again, I'm probably slaughtering that, but I like to say it that way, so we're going to keep doing it. This is the basic blue hero. This is the one that you always have access to. 3 attack is, so far in this review, the highest we've seen for a blue hero. And 8 health. 8 health is important because it means that you're not dying to Axe, and you're not dying to some of the other more popular heroes. You do still die to Bristleback, Phantom Assassin, Debbie, things like that, but 8 health is much better than 7 health because it gets you over a pretty important threshold. Now, Jahmai has a activated ability that also has a 4-round cooldown, and it's just draw a card. But that's a good enough activated ability. It's the sort of thing that when it comes up, you'll get value out of it. And it doesn't really diminish in returns too much unless you've already got a fistful of cards. So for a basic hero, given his stat line in this color specifically, because blue has pretty small stat lines typically, it's actually not half bad. Like when I have to play Jahmai the Wise because I just didn't draft good blue heroes, but maybe I have really good blue cards, I'm usually not that disappointed. Now, the signature card is Battlefield Control. This isn't anything to write home about, but it's also not bad. It provides a good utility. So 1 mana allows you to choose a unit. This can be friendly or enemy, and then you choose a combat target for it. This can make it so that your enemy heroes that would be killing one of yours instead attack like one of your minions, one of your creeps on the left or the right. This can make it so that your hero or maybe one of your creeps attacks one of the enemy heroes, ensuring a kill. This can make one of your heroes, for example, if they are unlucky and they roll one of the arrows that makes them attack to the left or the right, but they're open out in front of them, and you want to get damage in on a tower, you can use this to target the tower. So again, provides utility. The 1 mana cost is entirely reasonable. Is this the sort of thing that's going to routinely like win you the game? No, it's not like a, oh my god, amazing signature card, but you don't feel like at a disadvantage that you had to stick them in your deck. So overall, as far as a basic hero goes, our Wise buddy here is not half bad. So next up, we have Kanna. Kanna has 2 attack. Again, kind of a running theme here for the blue heroes. Not enough to kill a melee creep on its own. Kanna has a whopping 12 health, though, the most of any blue hero. So that is definitely worth noting. And then Kanna has an aura, a passive effect, and that is that the random allied melee creeps that are deployed are instead always deployed into Kanna's lane. So during the deployment phase, you normally deploy your heroes, and then 2 melee creeps spawn, and they go to random lanes. If you have Kanna on the board, they always go to where Kanna is. Now, it is worth noting Kanna has to be on the board. Her aura, her passive, if you will, does not count during the deploy phase. So the turn you deploy Kanna, those melee creeps will still land at random. If Kanna is already on the board, then they always go to where she is. And this can be really useful if you want to pressure a lane. The most common tactic I see with Kanna is that people will put Kanna in one lane and then figure out what the dead lane is, the one that they're not winning, and then go to the third lane, and that's where they stack most of their other heroes. Sometimes it's like a 3-2 split with one hero supporting Kanna, but I've seen people go straight 4 heroes in one lane and Kanna in another. Kanna pushes with the melee creeps, and they push with the other 4 heroes. Now, if you're taking that strategy, you need cards that provide mobility. So you either need some black heroes so that you can use something like Relentless Pursuit or a Dark Seer, or maybe you just proactively buying Scrolls of Town Portal. Whatever the case may be, you need mobility in those cases, but it is a strategy that I've seen employed. Now, it's worth talking about Kanna's signature card. 4 mana to prey on the weak. You summon a Hound of War for every damaged unit. And if you're wondering, a Hound of War is this unit, 2 attack, 1 health. But it is worth noting that with Prey the Weak, the Hound of War is for every damaged unit. This is both friendly and enemy. So if you have 2 units in the lane and your opponent has 2 units in the lane and all 4 are damaged but still alive, Prey on the Weak will summon 4 2/1s. This card is typically used as a source of burst damage against towers. That's the most common way. So if you're in a pretty evenly matched or contested lane, a lot of times there's damage going back and forth. You'll get 4 or 5 units damaged in the lane. You play Prey on the Weak, and then you get a big burst of damage against the tower. That's usually the way it's used. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the fact that Kanna is mentioned as a big part of the Celamine Storm combo deck. So if you're not familiar with that deck, the point of the deck is you ramp up until you can play. Let's go ahead and turn on the creeps here real quick. The Incarnation of Celamine. This fully restores your tower's mana after you play any card, right? So you play this, and then every time you play a card, you go back to at least 9 mana, because you had to have 9 to play this. And then we'll jump over here to the spells. And you can refill your hand with something like Diabolic Revelation. So you'll play this, does damage to a bunch of allies in all lanes, but you draw 2 cards, and you're going to refill your mana when you do so because of the Celamine. And then you essentially use Kanna here. Boop, we're back to Kanna. You use Kanna and her signature card because you've damaged everything with your Diabolic Revelations to make a bunch of units, and then you try to buff these as well. So the most common way, again, if you're playing this blue-green deck, is they use Emissary of the Quorum. So you make a bunch of units, then you use Celamine, and then you Diabolic Revelation to draw cards. That damages a bunch of stuff. You use Prey on the Weak, which makes a bunch of 2/1s. Then you play Emissary of the Quorum, right? This gives all of your 2/1s and everything else that you had on the board, +2 attack and +2 health, so those 2/1s become 4 3s, and then if you want, you can continue the chain, play another Diabolic Revelation, draw more cards, play another of Kanna's signature card, Prey on the Weak, and that will get you to even more damage. And so this is how that Celamine Storm combo deck like riles up, and you just kind of try to at least kill a tower in one turn. Like, that's the idea. You blow all these resources to kill a tower, and then your opponent is kind of in this scenario where they either need a mass amount of removal, whether it's an annihilation or even at any cost to get rid of the creeps at a bare minimum, or if they can't get rid of it, you can maybe push the combo even further and try to take out the Ancient the following turn. In the closed beta, I've had turns where I've done like 200 damage to a tower in Constructed. So it's entirely reasonable and feasible. This is why this combo deck is popular. It's also just honestly a lot of fun to pilot. So that is Kanna's primary use in Constructed as of right now, in my opinion. I have seen her also played in some token decks, but the Celamine Storm deck is the most popular. As far as draft goes, Kanna's a fine draft pick. The problem is if you don't have enough resources to support the lane split, like I talked about earlier, she can be a liability in draft. Because if all of your melee creeps are always going to one lane, and then you win that lane outright and your opponent abandons that lane, you've got to find a way to move Kanna to your contested lane, or else all of your melee creeps keep going to the lane you're already winning, and that actually becomes a hindrance and not a help. So in draft, Kanna is an attractive choice, but you do have to plan around being able to move her after you have effectively won the lane that she is in. That is something to take a note of. You could say to yourself, hey, I'll make sure I buy Scrolls of Town Portal, but they don't always show up. That card has a 25% chance of showing up every time you go to the shopping phase, and I have certainly played games where I've just never seen one, so you better have a backup plan, is what I'm saying. But to wrap this up, Kanna does see play in Constructed, does see play in draft. Pretty solid choice for blue because of the high health and a really good signature card, and you can expect to see her. Alright, Luna. Luna might be my favorite blue hero just because I think Eclipse is a neat card. So Luna has 3 attack. Again, most blue heroes don't have 4. And 8 health. 8 health is actually reasonable for a blue hero. Has a passive ability, and the passive ability is before the action phase, you deal 1 piercing damage to a random enemy and add a charge to each Eclipse card in your hand or deck. There is a strong chance that this passive is going to be modified by the time this goes live, so even though I'm recording this now, there are some things being tossed around, such as instead this would add 1 charge to 3 Eclipse cards in your deck and not every Eclipse card, and that's meant to kind of put a damper on the multiple Luna strategies in draft, because right now if you have 2 or 3 Lunas and their passives are each triggering, then by the time you can play your first Eclipse it might have like 9 charges or something absurd. So strong chance this passive is going to be altered in terms of how many charges are added, but the deal 1 piercing damage is going to stick, and that's important because that gives Luna the opportunity, the potential anyway, to clear a melee creep, because she does 3 damage and her passive has a chance of doing 4, which is, you're relying on RNG, but that's better than any of the other blue heroes we've went through so far in this review. Now, Luna does see play in Constructed, Luna does see play in Draft, and a lot of that has to do with Eclipse. Eclipse is a pretty powerful signature card. 6 mana, and it says repeat 1 time for each charge, so again, you get a charge on Eclipse every time that her passive ability triggers, and the charges are you deal 3 piercing damage to a random enemy. So the more charges this gets, the longer the game goes, the more impactful this is, and you can play Eclipse, and it can just nuke your opponent's entire board in some scenarios. And the fact that it's piercing damage is what makes Eclipse so powerful. It helps you kill those axes. It helps you deal with even Mazzies in draft. It helps you deal with people that do decide to stack armor. Again, the fact that Luna and Zeus, when we get to him, have reliable ways to deal piercing damage is actually one of the reasons that armor items are kind of undervalued right now in terms of purchasing items. It's a little bit of that and a little bit of the fact that health items are more cost effective, but yeah, Eclipse, fantastic signature card. Luna sees play in a lot of blue control decks, and I've even seen her played in 1 token deck. I'm not convinced that that deck was necessarily like going to be a meta deck, right? I think it was somebody experimenting at the time, but I have seen her played for sure, and you'll definitely see her in draft. Eclipse is a very, very powerful card in draft. Yeah, that's Luna. Not a ton more to say there. She's just good. All right, Meepo, or as I like to call him, Meepo, because everybody loves a Meepo. All right, 4 attack. Hooray! That is a high attack value for a blue hero. 5 health. Boo! 5 health is not very good. But Meepo actually has 2 special abilities. The first is United We Fall. This is a passive, and Meepo has Soulbound, which means if Meepo dies, other allied Meepos in every lane also die. And you'll understand what that means in a moment. The other one is an activated ability. This is Poof. Has a 2-round cooldown. And this says, move Meepo to an allied Meepo's lane. Deal 2 damage to the new enemy neighbors. Alright, so to understand both of those abilities, we have to see what Meepo's signature card is. So, the signature card is Divided We Stand. 4 mana, summon a Meepo. And a Meepo is just Meepo again, right? No tricks there. Meepo is Meepo. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, alright, does it make a copy of Meepo? No, it literally creates a brand new hero. It's treated like an individual hero. So the new Meepo and the old Meepo do not share items. The new Meepo and the old Meepo are both worth 5 gold if killed. And this is both the boom and the bust of Meepo. So you can use the signature card to generate as many as 3 more Meepos onto your team. So you can have 4 Meepos running around, which is great. That's like a ton more heroes. It's reliable. But they're also 4/5s. And so unless you're throwing items around willy-nilly, they're pretty killable. And when one dies, they all die. And your enemy, your opponent, gets gold for each of them. So nothing sucks worse than, like, you know, losing a Meepo who's a 4/5, and then your opponent gets 20 gold, and you lose a bunch of presents in all the lanes that Meepo was scattered in. Yeah. Meepo doesn't share items because it would be broken. Like, if you could get a Vesture of the Tyrant on Meepo and then copy Meepo, it would be silly. So that's why that's a thing. Now, it is worth noting, the active ability on Meepo is specific to each individual Meepo. So if you use one on one turn, but not one on another turn, and so on and so forth, like each individual Meepo can use Poof and they can hop around. That's one of the ways you're supposed to try to keep them safe. And it also is important to note that if you use Poof, it says you move to an allied Meepo's lane. That can be the same lane. If you have 2 Meepos in the same lane, you can use Poof and then just choose the other Meepo in the same lane, and your Meepo will take a new position in that lane, or you can use it to lane hop. So things Meepo is good for is accelerating the clock on lanes you're already winning, because if you play Meepo in a lane that you're likely going to win and you think your opponent's going to bail out on, Meepo's less likely to die there, and at that point he's like a big 4/5 extra creep, right? The risk and reward, the risk is mitigated and the reward is you kill that tower faster. The downside, though, is that, you know, you're pouring resources into a lane that you're probably already going to win anyway, so that's not great. Yeah, this is why he's Meepo. He's too much of a liability, but I'd be lying if I didn't say he's not a little bit of fun. I've experimented with him in Constructed. I tried to make him work. I couldn't do it. I did do some fun things, though. The next hero we're going to talk about is Ogre Magi, whose passive gives you a % chance to put a base copy of a spell in your hand. Divided We Stand counts as a spell. So between that and the Celamine card, if you get a little RNG going your way, you can actually create more than just the 3 bonus Meepos. You can make a lot of Meepos. Again, mostly a meme, kind of just a lot of fun, but it is something I think is worthwhile to at least try once in your life. As far as draft goes, I think Meepo might be even more of a liability than in Constructed. At least in Constructed, you can do things like run Revtel Signet to maybe mitigate some of the drawback of making more Meepos. In draft, every time I've tried to run Meepo, I'm really just donating gold, so doesn't see a lot of play there, as much as I'd like him to. And yeah, on that we'll move on to Augur Magi. Alright, so 3 attack, again, pretty standard for blue heroes, not enough to kill a melee creep. 7 health, also pretty standard and not great. Dies to axe and a bunch of other heroes in one shot. But has a passive. Passive is multicast. After you play a blue spell, so it has to be blue, 25% chance to put a base copy of that spell into your hand. Now this is base copy because of Eclipse, right? It's going to create the ones without extra charges on it. But again, with Meepo, it can create you more Meepos. This is just like one of those passives that gives you incidental, like accidental value over the course of a game. It's not necessarily something that you're trying to take advantage of, because 25% chance is just too low to be consistent, but you know, it helps every now and then. The real strength of Ogre Magi, in my opinion, is the signature card, and that's Ignite. This card is very, very good in draft. This is a cheaper conflagration. This is 3 mana. It's an improvement. Deal 1 piercing damage to each enemy before the action phase. Unlike conflagration, though, this is piercing damage. So this will slowly but surely over time kill off that axe that wouldn't be taking any damage from conflagration. So Ignite, I think, has a lot of really cool uses. I think that this is the card that actually makes Ogre Magi playable in draft. Ogre Magi is playable in Constructed for memes, like I said, but in draft he's a perfectly acceptable and fine blue hero because Ignite is actually a really strong improvement. Helps keep lanes under control, helps push damage on armored up heroes and units. Ignite can be a great way to counteract Enchantress's signature card, so yeah, Ignite is kind of the reason to play Ogre Magi in draft, in my opinion. Alright, next up we have Outworld Devourer. 4 attack, 6 health. So health is a concern, but 4 attack is nice. This thing actually kills a melee creep. Hooray! This also has a passive that is specific to blue cards. After you play a blue card, there's a 50% chance to restore 2 mana. So you might get a Crystal Maiden effect, but this is also only in Devourer's lane and only for blue cards. If Crystal Maiden's not seeing play, Outworld Devourer doesn't see a ton of play. Outworld Devourer, however, does see more play in draft than Crystal Maiden just because of the body. The 4 attack and 6 health is just better than the 2/5 on Crystal Maiden. The signature card, however, is stun a unit this round, give that unit damage immunity this round. This is 4 mana to do so, and it is kind of flexible. If you want to protect a unit or one of your own heroes, you can use it on your own hero to make sure that it doesn't take damage. The downside in doing so is if it's your only hero in the lane, it's preventing you from taking more actions because your hero is now stunned. If it's on a hero in a lane and you've got 2 heroes, it might lock you out of a color because, again, it's stunned. You can use this on an enemy hero, and it is useful there if you expect your opponent to play a big splashy spell or some other splashy card, right? Like if you are in a lane and your opponent has 1 red hero and you think Time of Triumph might be coming, then yeah, stun it. Who cares if they get damage immunity? You were really more worried about Time of Triumph. Same thing with like a blue hero in Annihilation. If you think that's coming, stun the blue hero. So what if you don't kill the enemy blue hero? You prevented them from taking actions, and that's the important piece. So this isn't like an amazing signature card, but there are a decent amount of uses for it. It's moderately flexible, and given the okay stat line, Outworld Devourer is like a middle-of-the-road blue hero for draft, in my opinion. Does not see play in Constructed. There are just better blue heroes in Constructed. So next up we have Prelix. 3 attack, not great. 5 health, not great. Passive ability, summon a melee creep into Prelix's lane each deployment phase. Now, the small stats are offset by the passive, so this is really like getting almost 5/9 worth of stats in a blue hero, assuming that Prelix doesn't die, because this summons an extra melee creep. I know that's not like super explicit there, but this isn't like Kanna where it takes your creeps that would have already spawned and then like drags them to wherever Kanna is. This is, you summon an additional melee creep. So you get your 2 that go random places, and then you get 1 that goes to Prelix. Or, in the case of some token decks I've seen, you'll play Kanna and Prelix, and you use Prelix as a way to pressure another lane. So Kanna will suck up the ones you would normally get, and then Prelix, as long as she survives, will bring additional creeps to wherever she is. And I say if she survives because that is the key. The 5 health is a bit of a problem. You've got to find a way to protect her. If you can do that, she'll generate a lot of long-term value, both from her passive, but also from the signature card, Barracks. Barracks just is her passive, but on an improvement. Summon a melee creep into this lane each deployment phase. Again, this is typically done in token decks, also sometimes done in the Salamine Storm deck as a way to just generate more bodies for the Prey of the Week. But this allows you, if you have Kanna in one lane, to make sure you're still getting melee creeps in other lanes to generate pressure. Barracks is a solid card. As such, Prelix does see play, like I said, in constructed decks for like token-oriented stuff and as a variant of the Salamine Storm deck. And Prelix definitely sees play in draft. I usually see her in this round 2 or round 3 slot because you want her to come down when you can protect her. Round 3 is the most common because by then you've usually bought at least 1 health item and it helps being able to deploy her and then immediately buff her health. Again, also in draft, you're probably playing her just because her signature card is good enough that the drawback of her maybe dying once or twice is offset by that. So Prelix is a good, solid blue hero. Next up we have Skywrath Mage. 3 attack, 6 health. So he's not killing melee creeps on his own. 6 health, bit of a liability. Has an activated ability that has a 2-round cooldown. You give a hero and its allied neighbors -2 armor this round. So he makes it so that a hero and its neighbors take extra damage once every other round. That's actually pretty good. The one downside to Concussive Shot, though, is that you have to spend an action to activate it, right? It is an activated ability, and so a lot of times if you have like a spell that you want to use to deal a bunch of damage to a hero, and you also need to rely on Concussive Shot to get the job done to actually take the hero out, you're opening yourself up for your opponent to be able to respond. You're basically giving up initiative for his active ability instead of the big splashy play that you want. So hypothetically, if you're playing Skywrath alongside a Zeus and you have an opponent that's at like 6 health and you're going to play Thunder God's Wrath, that only does 4 damage normally. So you say to yourself like, okay, I'm going to use Concussive Shot to start my turn and then I'll play Thunder Gods and that'll kill their hero. So you start with your Concussive Shot and the opponent goes, oh, hey, he targeted this hero. Bad shit's about to happen, right? That's not okay. So they throw a health item or a health potion or something on the hero to protect it, and now they have effectively like countered your strategy because you telegraphed with Concussive Shot. So it's a very cool and useful activated ability, but you do have to keep in mind that the fact that you have to use it means it's not always the value it appears on paper. And the signature card, in my opinion, is the reason to play Skywrath Mage. Mystic Flare is 6 mana. You deal 12 damage evenly divided among a unit and its allied neighbors. This is a pretty powerful signature card, pretty powerful spell. So if a unit is by itself, it takes 12 damage. That's a lot of damage. All right. If a unit has 1 friendly unit next to it, right? So you're targeting an enemy and it's got 1 unit next to it. Each of them takes 6. That's still pretty reasonable. Likely kills both of those units. And if that unit has something on the left and on the right of it, then all 3 of them take 4 damage each. Now, this would be significantly better if it was piercing damage. It is not, but it's a great card at taking out lone targets. Being able to just nuke something for 12 is great. And a lot of times, if you can do the 6 and 6, you're in a great spot as well. So this card actually sees play in Constructed. I've seen it played in a couple of the like blue-black control variants that run 3 blue heroes. It gets played as the 3rd. This card definitely sees play in draft because Mystic Flare is very powerful in draft. The stat line is a bit of a liability, but in case you haven't noticed, most blue heroes have bad stat lines, so it's not... like, if you're playing blue, you're not really worried about stats, I guess is what I'm trying to say, as my voice cracks, because again, I'm filming these as I'm getting over being sick. But, yeah, you want to try to throw him in your round 2 or your round 3 slot so that he survives at least long enough to do something. And you want to take advantage of that signature ability, signature card. So next up we have Venomancer. This is a card that I've seen played in a couple of constructed decks that were token based, and I actually see played a decent amount in draft, despite the pretty sad stat line. 2 attack is not great, 6 health is not great. But Venomancer has a passive ability of summon a Plague Ward into Venomancer's lane, each deployment phase. Plague Ward is a 1/3 creep, and before the action phase it deals 2 piercing damage to a random enemy neighbor of Plague Ward. The fact that it's piercing damage is pretty useful. The fact that it's random, not as useful, but still this is like the equivalent of a 3/3 unit. And the signature card that comes with Venomancer is summon 2 Plague Wards. So his passive means that you're summoning an extra one each turn, and the signature card means you can summon 2 on demand. So again, as you can see, in a token deck, where you're just trying to generate as many bodies as possible, Venomancer's pretty attractive. In fact, as I've kind of been hinting at, there is a green and blue token deck I've seen floating around where you try to make use of Kanna putting bodies in one lane, Prolix and Venomancer putting bodies in the other lane, and then their cards are making more bodies, and you use stuff like Dimensional Portal to make more melee creeps. And the reason it's typically blue-green is because Lycan has a pretty good creep, and he buffs the bodies to the left and the right of him. Drow buffs bodies in every lane, and honestly, she's just the best hero in the game. So if you're trying to go wide and just kind of overrun somebody, it's a pretty cool package. The downside is usually that strategy is kind of hard countered by the blue-based control decks. At any cost will like single-handedly wipe your board. Not just the creeps, but kills Venomancer as well, kills Prolix as well. So that deck isn't super popular because it is hard countered by the control decks, but I have seen people running it, so it is worth noting. And Venomancer is entirely solid in draft. Again, if you're playing blue, you're not really playing it for the stats anyway, and as far as abilities go, getting an extra creep every round and being able to summon some extra creeps with your signature card, not half bad. So does see some play in draft, sees a little bit of play in constructed. Last up we have Zeus. Zeus definitely sees play in constructed. I would say he's probably the most popular blue hero in constructed, period. 3 attack, not great, but as we've seen for the rest of the blue heroes, pretty par, pretty average. 7 health, not great. It's dying to Axe and a few other heroes in the first round, but again, for a blue hero, pretty average. Now, Zeus has a passive of Static Field. It does 1 piercing damage to Zeus's enemy neighbors after you play a blue spell. So unlike Luna that's dealing 1 damage to 1 target at random every turn, Zeus, every time you play a blue spell, can do as much as 3 piercing damage, 1 to each of his enemy neighbors. So he can help really clear a path, right? The fact that his piercing damage really helps against units with armor. And then the big reason that Zeus gets played, if you've been following the game at all while it was in closed beta or watched some of the PAX footage, you know it's his signature card. It's Thunder God's Wrath. 7 mana, but you deal 4 piercing damage to all enemy heroes in all lanes. Each enemy hero in all lanes. So if your opponent's got 5 heroes on the board, Thunder God's Wrath is going to do 4 piercing damage to each of them. Piercing matters a lot. The fact that this goes cross lane is a lot. This is actually one of those cards that's common to highlight when you talk about the importance of priority. When you're coming up to that 7 mana turn, if you've got priority in that very first lane and you can pop your Thunder God's Wrath before your enemy does, a lot of times you can kill their heroes before they kill yours, and then use that to kind of like snowball your tempo through the rest of that turn. It's a big pivotal play. Yeah, Thunder God's Wrath is the reason that Bristleback sees play, because between that and Eclipse, so Luna being the other one, the Viscous Nasal Goo can sometimes do things to heroes, allowing the piercing damage to be amplified. It's just good. I mean, as you can imagine, right? It goes cross lanes, it does piercing damage, it's a great card. It's a must-have in control decks. If you're playing any sort of blue control deck, you're probably running Zeus. And if you're in draft, it's the kind of late game bomb that can really swing things in your favor. And if you're running blue in your draft, that's a great place to start. So that's Zeus. And that is the end of the blue heroes, as I have talked through them and again kind of given a review. When I do these, I don't like to do like star rankings or anything like that, just because in my opinion a lot of these cards are very situational. They're good in certain circumstances, not good in others. I think Kanna might be a poster child for that. Kanna can be very strong if built around or if you have the right cards to support it, and Kanna can be sometimes a negative or a liability and strand you in one lane. So I think that with the exception of your Drows or your Legion Commanders that are just good all the time, most cards are situationally useful, and I'd much rather just talk to you about what the cards do, the situations where they're useful, and then let you, the viewers, use your smarts, your intelligence to say, okay, I understand why or when this could be good, and then make your choices, make your own decisions from there. So yeah, hopefully this helped. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you made it this far, I really appreciate you watching the video, and I hope to catch you next time.